Hello everyone, it's Jez Corden from Windows Central here, and I am joined by our illustrious Editor-in-Chief, Daniel Rubino. Today we're going to talk about Gears of War 4. Stay tuned. So Dan, you were lucky enough to head up to Vancouver to the Coalition headquarters to check out Gears of War 4. Do you have a nice time?
Yeah, it was actually really nice. Now, I'm coming into this as sort of I guess you definitely classify me as a newbie, because I do not know that much about Gears of War. Although I started playing the Ultimate Edition. So I didn't know anything about the studio and their sort of history. I had to kind of, train myself a little bit before, or do some research before I went up there. But yeah, it's Vancouver's a beautiful city. They got a great location. They share an office with Microsoft. They have their own floor. It's definitely kind of a cool place, and it's all Gears of War themed.
That's awesome. I mean, the Coalition were originally Black Tusk Studios. They were developing a project for Xbox One, but then Microsoft bought the Gears of War IP, and then a bunch of people from Epic jumped across to join Black Tusk, and they renamed to the Coalition, and now they're like full-blown Gears of War machine, you could call them.
Yeah, they're all very exciting people. I mean, it's very, I don't know, you would kind of expect, right, them to be enthusiastic about Gears of War, but it's just interesting. They're very close up there. They all go out and do things together. It's a very small group that's just enjoys really what they are doing. It was a great experience to meet them all.
Yeah, I got that sense when I met some of them at Gamescom as well, and it's like they've been with the company for so long, together, working on Gears, first at Epic and now at the Coalition, and there does seem to be a unique culture about that studio.
I was also going to say, I feel like they feel liberated being at Microsoft, which to some people may sound kind of funny, but Epic is just one of those big studios that I imagine working with them is you get a lot of resources, but there's a lot of overhead and bureaucracy and different things you have to deal with, where I think Microsoft's a little bit more fluid. They're allowed to flourish a little bit more on their own.
Yeah, I think Epic's focus is the Unreal Engine rather than game development. I think that probably had an effect on it. But anyway, you were lucky enough to play a significant amount of Gears last week, I believe. Can you tell us a little bit about what you played?
Sure. So we did the campaign on the first day. We did about 2 hours of it, so it's more than what I think other people have been exposed to. And so, unfortunately, we weren't able to record the game footage yet. I'm not really too sure why. I guess they don't want too much of the story revealed. But the campaign was definitely a lot of fun. In fact, if I had to... So, obviously, I'm not a hardcore gamer, so forgive my analogies. I'm not quite as good as you and your team. But if I had to make an analogy, because I've only played a few games, it felt like Half-Life 2 when I played that on the PC. And I remember this one summer night I was playing it. It was the first time. And I was really impressed with how the game sort of changed modalities. Like, one of the cool things in Half-Life 2 was how the day would shift, right? It would go from day to nighttime and everything, and the mood would change. It would go from like action adventure to almost like this like kind of zombie thing, and then you would also go into those speedboat chase scenes and all that, and it felt like I was playing a movie, and that was a really different thing as opposed to a first-person shooter where you're just sort of or even third person where you're just walking around and going through the grinding. And so Gears of War 4 felt very much like that to me. I will admit some of it does become it borderline becomes redundant. And that's one thing I think, people are going to have issue with. It's, you're fighting for a while the DBs, the robots, which are part now the Gears, the Coalition of Governments, the COG. Yeah. And so you fight them, and they're actually really a lot of fun to fight, because I also made the analogy when I was talking to him about this. It reminded me of the game RoboCop, just how androids or robots back then had this like weird personality that was borderline humorous. And so you fight them for a while, and then you meet up with basically what is the underlying threat in the game, which is another sort of mutant creature. And it's kind of neat because every time it just feels like it's about to get a little grindy, they change it up and it shifts. And so there's like a bunch of different types of scenes, and it was just I was very much into it, I have to admit. It wasn't. I played it on relatively, I think, the easy mode, but it wasn't frustrating at all either to play things.
I think the comparison to Half-Life is interesting. It sounds as though there's like like a cinematic variety in the game, because like when you talk about how in Half-Life 2 you do go through those like the almost vehicular levels, and then there's like almost survival horror level, and then there's lots of puzzling and that sort of stuff.
So if you saw, like, I think in the trailer you see there's a scene where they jump on motorcycles, and that actually becomes playable. It reminds me very much of an arcade game I used to play when I was a kid, where there's this one scene, like, I don't even remember what game it was. It might have been Top Gun or something, where you're flying behind like a bomber jet, and you got to shoot out its engines, and like they have like the jet kind of flying back and forth, and you have to wait till it lines up. And it's a scene very much like that, and it felt very arcadish to me, and it was just a neat change up from the what was before and what people I think expect from typical Gears of War.
That's cool. So did you play on Xbox One or PC?
So we did Xbox One. There were some PCs available, but I didn't get to try those, but I just stuck with the Xbox One.
How did it look on Xbox One?
Yeah, it looked fantastic. Now, we were playing with computer monitors, so it wasn't on a full HDR TV, although I did get to see the HDR version demonstrated, which was a really neat thing. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, so it was just on a computer screen. It looked really good. The graphics looked amazing. One of the big themes in Gears of War 4, of course, is now the environment on the planet itself is sort of reacting to what's going on. So there are these giant wind firestorms that happen. And it's really neat because they happen in the background, and you can see them kind of coming in the distance, and then they get closer, and the environment changes, the wind picks up, and leaves are blowing around. And when you see this thing in the sky, and by the way, it reminds me very much, if you've seen Mad Max Fury Road, the scene where they're in, I was going to say the desert, but of course, but where they hit the giant sandstorm and the trucks are exploding, and it's that combination of wind and fire. It looks just like that. Wow. And so it was very ominous. You would like kind of look up and see this thing. It was kind of, and then like I said, the environment changes and you could feel it as you're playing. Like the wind is stronger, it's a little harder to walk and stuff. And apparently all that's generated dynamically, which is kind of neat.
That sounds awesome. Did you get to try any of the new weapons at all?
Yeah, so there were quite a few weapons. Actually, there's a great versus mode, which now I forgot the name of it.
Is it Arms Race? I think you might.
Yes, Arms Race. Sorry, I should have. It was a few days ago. It's been a long weekend. Yeah, Arms Race is really neat. So there's 13 weapons now, and in Arms Race, what you do, it's team versus team. And the idea is, it's kind of interesting. Every team starts with the same weapon, and it's usually like one of the bigger type weapons. And for every 3 kills you get of the other team, you get to switch a weapon. And you don't know what you're getting next, so you could be in the middle of using like the shotgun, and then you're going to switch to the explosive bow, which, sorry, I forgot all the names of the actual weapons. But and so it's kind of fun because, like, or if you're using like a pistol, also now you get a long shot. It obviously changes the dynamic of how you can take on someone if you're like right in front of them. And the idea, of course, is you're going to cycle through all 13 weapons. Whoever finishes the cycle of 13 weapons wins the match. So obviously it's a combination. You got to shoot more people and kill them more, but it's always changing the dynamic of the game because you don't know what weapon is coming next. And that's actually a really good tutorial almost on the weapons and learning what they're good for, because obviously there's different, long shots very different from the pistol, and learning the pros and cons of sort of each weapon.
Definitely. I mean, you mentioned tutorials, and you're comparing Gears to a lot of previous games, and I am interested in your perspective from you say less hardcore gamer, like someone like me who plays games all day every day.
Right.
And so I just wondered, like, what is your perspective on how accessible Gears of War 4 is? Because, like, a lot of people probably will be coming to Gears 4 for the first time. A significant amount of people, I would say. So, like, do you think it's accessible for new players? Maybe even less hardcore gamers and that sort of thing?
Yeah, absolutely. So whenever you hear like Gears of War 4, of course, the immediate thing, as a non-gamer, someone who's not familiar with it, you're going to think, well, I didn't play the other 3, so why would I want 4? But then again, you're going to see the commercials, and you'll be like kind of interested because they're pretty dramatic commercials. They're going to premiere a new one on today anyway, and it's going to actually premiere also on the U.S. football in the evening. And so you're going to be interested. But what's really neat about it is you can think of Gears of War 4 as a starting off point for a new generation. So there are definitely if you played the previous 3, you're going to really enjoy 4 because it's a continuation of some of the characters and what happens 25 years later, and there's definitely that connection. But if you've never played before, you don't need to know what happens in 1, 2, or 3. They give you just enough backstory that you kind of get it. And the way I can best describe it, it's very much like what J.J. Abrams does with like the new Star Wars. If you never saw the original trilogy, 4, 5, and 6, you could still watch Episode 7 for what it is. It's a standalone kind of thing, and you can just kind of get what's going on. And then if you go back and you watch the other ones, it makes a little bit more sense, fills in some gaps and all that. But as someone who, I started playing the Ultimate Edition, so I'm pretty familiar with some of the basics of the game and the story. But I still hopped right into this because you're getting new characters, you're getting new background. It's 25 years later, a lot has changed, but it's very accessible. Especially, I thought the campaign was just really good. It was interesting. There's some humor in it that had me laughing at some scenes. I believe, was it Marcus, the original character?
Yeah, that's
Is that
right.
his name? So like he's like, they call him Old Man Marcus now because he's it's 25 years later, but he's still just like that curmudgeon grouch. That's I don't know. I have a lot of jokes about him just because one, I'm curious about how's he get that jacked to stay that jacked even as he's older, but he still doesn't seem like he ever cracks a smile, but he still is making like pretty hilarious jokes throughout the game. That definitely had me, kind of chuckling. But yeah,
it sounds really good. I've played it a little bit at E3 and Gamescom and stuff. And I think it's worth mentioning as well that Microsoft recently announced that people who pick up Gears of War 4 for a limited time will also receive Gears of War Ultimate Edition, Gears of War 2, Gears of War 3 and Gears of War Judgment on Xbox One backwards compatibility. So when it does come out on October 11th, you will get access to all these previous games, and if you've got Xbox One, you can play through them and go back and experience the story and that sort of thing. So we've talked a little bit about the campaign, we've talked a little bit about multiplayer and that sort of thing. Now, did you play Horde mode? Because this is one of the main modes that people are talking about. Can you give us some impressions on that?
Sure. So Horde mode, I was unfamiliar, obviously, with a lot of... So this is actually one of the more interesting aspects that I find in gaming. So I grew up playing like Unreal Tournament, and even before that, Doom. I would do modem to modem Doom, calling him my best friend, just to show you how old I am. But I never really got hardcore into the online stuff when it came to like Xbox. Like I did Unreal Tournament a long time ago, but that was kind of about it. So when it comes to video games these days, I'm still primarily a campaign kind of person, and part of that's because whenever I do try to play, team versus team kind of things or co-ops online, I find I usually just die a lot. And it really depends on the game, right? So Star Wars Battlefront doesn't have a lot of you don't have a lot of practice. You have the little tutorials and stuff like that, and the little small campaigns, but you're kind of just thrown into it, and you end up dying a lot. I just find the matchmaking, not very good. So I stay away typically from those. But what was cool about this, one, I was kind of forced to play because that's what I was there for. This was on day 2. All we did was multiplayer and co-op, and we did it for around 6 hours. And so I was kind of forced to get into it. And so there's all different types out there, and one of those is Horde mode. And Horde mode actually is very accessible if you're new to online gameplay, because you're on a team and you're versus an AI PC kind of thing, right? So you're not playing actual other players. What it is, though, it's a very much like a, the level starts off, you have a base that you have to set up, and so you basically can move this around anywhere on the map you want to. And the game hasn't started until you basically unpack it and set up your base. And that's what's kind of neat, because it adds this element of strategy. And we saw that a lot. There'd be some places you could put your base high up so you can see down on everything and get a really good vantage point. And that sounds really good, except now you're completely exposed to aerial attacks, of which there are quite a few, especially in the later stages. So you could also then try to put it, say, inside something or near some internal structures, which is good because you can hide out there from that. But then, you have, these enemies launching, basically grenades and other projectiles into like a hut or something. And now, obviously, when something explodes inside, it does a lot more damage. So there's pros and cons for doing each one, and that's what's kind of neat, is figuring out the best place to put your base and where you're going to set up. And that's kind of new from what I understand in Horde Mode 3.0. And what happens is you get waves, and it comes in waves of 10. On the 10th wave, there's always sort of like a big boss. It gets a lot harder. And it's really neat how it progresses. So levels 1 through 5 as you would expect, kind of easy, right? It's just you're almost being introduced to the enemies, kind of feeling it out. What happens is, and this is what, and they tell you this is what's going to happen. You're going to become very aggressive. So you're going to like move away from your base and go after the enemies as they're coming, because you're basically able to beat them, and it's nothing too challenging. But then after 6 to 10, the enemies become a lot more aggressive, and you find yourself, you don't want to get away from your base. You want to kind of pull back your resources and set up your infrastructure to better handle these attacks, because they're going to come from behind and from the sides, and they're going to start flanking you. And it's just it was a really neat kind of challenge on how that happened. And there's also this class system, which is kind of neat. We've seen this in a lot of other games, and you can definitely tell that they're taking elements from other popular games. Like I'm thinking of like Borderlands 2, which just celebrated its 4th birthday, which is so crazy. Borderlands 2, of course, has this sort of class system. You pick a character and then you level up and all this kind of thing. And they do the same thing with this game. But what's neat about it is you're technically not limited to it. If you choose Sniper, you can still go do engineering kind of things. You can buy a tool and go build things if you want to. And if you're a soldier, you can go back and get a sniper gun and snipe people. Like, you're not completely restricted by that. And I kind of liked that flexibility. But yeah, ideally you're going to have a team of like 5 to 6 people, and each one will have one of these roles: a scout, or sniper, a soldier, engineer. And you're going to each one is going to be really excel at that job. And then you can kind of level up and get these cards that enhance your abilities and stuff.
Yeah, Gears of War Horde mode is like one of the coolest things about Gears of War for me. So I'm really excited to see how it turns out.
Yeah, there's 50 levels, and I actually did see it get beat, because we during this process it went on for hours, and we're changing in and out people for interviews, and so it just went on for hours. And some of the guys from the coalition were jumping in too, but yeah, we actually beat all 50 levels. And it's what happens is every 10 series basically. So on basically wave 11, wave 21, you're going to get new things like enemies, I think, have like twice the damage capability, or different, like they get like different strengths basically that makes it harder, and things change up. But no, it was fun. I actually had a lot of fun with that. I think it's great if you can grab a couple of your buddies, or even just randomly jump online. Now, it's kind of funny talking about that, because I also played with Mark Wim, who's our videographer. He's a little bit different. He didn't care for Horde as much because of the team elements. In other words, and that was because he was the weakest link on his team. So he felt embarrassed by that, because like your team would be doing well and you're the one that kind of lets them down, or you accidentally, fire an explosive projectile and you kill off half of them. And so he likes just the versus modes, where it's just you for yourself, because at least if you die or something, it's like it's on you, right? I thought that was kind of funny, because I don't feel that way, but he does.
Yeah, it kind of gets, you kind of get the sense that there's something for everyone in Gears of War 4. Like, there's a lot of value in that package, even when you disregard the fact that you get Gears 1, 2, and 3 and Judgment as well. It feels like there's a lot of value contained in that package. But beyond gameplay, you also got to speak to a lot of people at the Coalition, I understand. What was that like? Did they give you any scoops, any cool information?
So a lot of it was like, for one, what I mentioned earlier about how, when you go do online multiplayer and how matchmaking occurs is super important. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Star Wars Battlefront was kind of criticized as not being very good with that. And this is one critical area I think people tend to review games on, is how good it is for matchmaking. And so Gears of War 4 uses a Microsoft algorithm that basically calculates your experience and how good you are, and then matches you up with other people like that. And to me, that sounded really nice. And you can actually see it. It's sort of like it's like metals, basically. I think there's like silver, there's bronze, silver, gold, and there's platinum, and I think there's one other metal or something that's like very high status. And so you can basically, I think you play the first 5 rounds and it judges you how good you are, and then you get like basically put into this category. And of course you can move up and level up through them as you get experience and get good. But the idea behind this, of course, is that when you do go online to play other people, they're going to match you up with similarly styled and ability. So we obviously have to put that to the test and see how good it is, especially, this is more important, I would say, for obviously people who are new to it, And I think that's important because you do want to grow the audience. It's not just about like the Call of Duty group, right? You know, the guys who are just first-person shooters and that's all they play and they love to go in and spawn kill and all that kind of thing. So how good that does. But I just liked how they really took into consideration, how that goes. The other thing we learned is also the PC. So, of course, this is Play Anywhere. So if you buy it on Xbox One, the digital version, you'll also get it for Windows 10 PC. And that's really interesting because now the question is, well, can you play, PC people? So you can't play against them, which would be good because it's pretty much well known with the keyboards and mouse. It's going to be a little more accurate, and you can do a lot more things than say on a controller version. So there's no way to versus. Although you can, if you want to set up your own private LAN party, you can actually have PC versus console people, which is interesting. So I think that was kind of neat. But if you're just doing co-op, you can have PC and Xbox One people on the same team, and you'll actually see by their name, it'll actually say PC. And that's kind of neat too, because then you can see, if they are better, and they may be, right, because you can do a little more crazy things on the PC version. It would be kind of neat to have them on your team to see how well they're doing. But it's really neat how they're sort of balancing that, taking all that stuff into consideration.
Yeah, it sounds brilliant, and my personal hype for the game is off the chart. I'm trying to limit it a bit because there has been quite a few big disappointments this generation of consoles among gamers, So I'm trying to limit my hype a little bit, but all signs look positive. Would you say that? Would you say that's a good way to sum it up?
Sure. Yeah. No, I mean, all the multiplayer co-op and versus stuff was a lot of fun. I really didn't have, much issue with it at all. It was just fun, and the campaign was good. They have there's also this thing with the maps where you get a DLC, and so there was some controversy. At least it was more just misunderstood about how they're going to have. Basically, the maps are free to play. But what they're going to do is they're going to limit it to 12 or 15, I think, just to keep the inventory kind of so you don't spend hours choosing maps. But if you use the DLC and you buy the maps, you get to keep those forever. And because sometimes they may disappear off of the free public server, basically. But if you own the map, you can play, and your friends don't need to own that map. They can just play your map. And so if you have a favorite one, you just want to keep it, you can kind of do that. But they really seem to be both aware of the hardcore Gears of War people who are coming into this and expecting a classic Gears game. But they're also, opening it up for new people as well. And they're also just creating some new ways to improve upon things. It's kind of funny I know this technically isn't a first-person shooter, it's like a third-person, but that style of game is sort of, it's like, okay, you go on, it's versus each other. It's like you just, shoot. But how do you improve upon that and make it a little bit better? And I think they're doing a lot of thought around it. I think they did a pretty good job. The musical score is also really good, and, I did get to see the HDR, and it was kind of cool because, for those who don't know, there's the high dynamic range, and Gears of War 4 is one of the first games on Xbox, and also with Forza Horizons, to have HDR enabled, and it's really impressive. They did a split screen and live playing, and they showed us what HDR looked like and what non-HDR looked like, and I tell you see way more detail with the HDR stuff. You're getting... on some TVs, the brightness can go up to 1,000. So if you're looking at a fire, that center flame would be 1,000 nits, but then your blacks can go all the way down to almost 0. So you get this wide dynamic range of colors, and it totally looks amazing. When you look at the moon with HDR, you can see way more craters and just detail on that moon versus the non-HDR version. So if you're considering getting a 4K TV with HDR, this may be the game to do it.
That sounds awesome. And also, my wallet hates you right now.
Yeah.
Got to ask one more question, the burning question. Which is your favorite mode?
Arms Race I thought was a lot of fun. There's also one called Dodgeball, which was kind of interesting. But I thought Horde was neat. I'm more of a co-op team player, and I like the idea of everybody kind of... Like I said, I like how this created a class thing where if you're good, if you want to be a scout and you want to run around and pick up the PowerPoints and stuff like that, and you get I like how they balance things between these different options, and yet you're not completely constrained in that. So you can go and pick up other weapons and, be the heavy, right? If you want to go pick up like a big missile launcher thing, you can totally do that too. And I just like the creativity that's involved there, setting up the base and all that kind of stuff. It's definitely a lot of fun. It's a challenge. The enemy is it's dynamic how it adjusts and attacks you. It's just, I thought that was probably I think that's the one most people are going to play the longest. But then again, some people just want the classic escalation. You just verse each other, team versus team, whoever can shoot the most, That one, I think, it's going to be a little bit less accessible for new players, but also depends on how well it's balanced. So it should be cool. And then Arms Race is just really good. I encourage everyone to play that just to learn about the weapons. You'll get a quick tutorial on what they all do.
Sounds awesome. Well, thank you very much for joining us, Dan. This has been really exciteful, and as I said, my wallet hates you. I need to buy an Xbox One S now, 4K TV, Gears of War 4, high dynamic range, and all that sort of stuff.
Yep.
But yeah. If you want to let everyone listening know where they can find you on the internet.
Sure, you can just find me on Twitter, Daniel_Rubino, R-U-B as in boy, I-N-O. And I'd also mention we are planning to do some streaming of this, so definitely pay attention to Windows Central.
That'll probably be on beam.pro/Windows Central. And I've been Jez Corden for Windows Central. You can find me at Jez Corden, Corden. And thanks for listening, guys. See you next time.
Almost there! Everyone, come on, get inside! Tower's coming down!